Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. In weather, mist, just like the previous 4 days. If anyone can hear our broadcast, know that we are making every effort to help. Our last report from the outside revealed the tragic destruction of Hartford, Connecticut. Wait a minute. What was that spike? Hello out there! If you can hear me, you're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, CM Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
And Benjamin Graham.
Hey, constant readers.
And today we are finishing our coverage of The Mist, and Josh is leading our discussion.
Let's get right into it because the second half of The Mist is all insanity all the time. Quick recap, Mist happened in a grocery store. That's catches you up.
That's a mist did.
A mist did it. And grocery store.
It's a mystery.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio.
That wasn't that bad. I don't deserve that.
Pretty good.
It's pretty good. So where we left off is we've lost a bag boy and some flat earthers, and Mrs. Carmody is slowly starting a cult. Right?
Yeah.
A nice catch up. We pick up with everybody in chapter 7 entitled The First Night. What a night. We talked about this a little last episode of people kind of pairing off and finding the groups they belong to in this area. But I like that the butcher, Mr. McVeigh, is cooking chicken on a gas grill because he's been the butcher at the store forever. And nobody's eating it except for Mrs. Carmody.
Yeah. I'd be eating it.
Oh, absolutely. But I love that he is in the kitchen on this grill cooking past the point where everyone has stopped eating. Mm-hmm. That's such an unnerving sight, and also goes into what we talked about last week, everyone coping in their own way. He has found a task, and he's just going to keep doing it until he can't anymore.
I would have attached myself to him because my coping is eating.
Same.
What did you guys think of the Hattie Turman conversation? So there's a brief scene where we have another of many heartbreaking Billy moments where he wakes up and asks if we're still in the store. Mm-hmm. And when David says yes, he just goes back to sleep.
About Billy, it didn't occur to me at first. Because, Billy spends so much of this book just sleeping. And since it takes place really, for the most part, over the course of 24 hours, give or take a little more, it almost seems like just King saying, the kid goes to sleep so the main character can go do shit. Until later on in the book, where near the end, just as a toss away, Dave says, I need to take care of Bill because he's been sleeping a lot and I don't like it. And that made it click for me. Like, of course he's a little kid. He can't do anything. And the trauma of this is massive.
Yeah. This is just this small kid making himself even smaller and smaller as this book goes. And it's heartbreaking for David as he has to watch his child go through this.
Especially when you get a scene of them playing for a minute and he's chasing him down the aisles. He's like, he giggled.
Yeah. So this conversation is when he's talking to Hattie, who is somebody who's babysat Billy before. And Hattie says that she confesses that she knows her husband is dead. And David says he doesn't believe that, but he knows he's lying. How did that hit for you guys?
It's such an interesting idea. And I kept wondering, because I don't know if we missed it or if it didn't really go into detail, because a tree crashed through their house. And I know they got the glass cleaned up, but that means that their home is not secure. It's open to the elements. And so I couldn't figure out if he thought that because he just assumed, she couldn't she didn't have anywhere to go to get away from the mist, or if this was supposed to be another element of these strong, like, premonitions, I guess, that he's had from the start.
I really love that the what you mentioned, that, you know, the fact that their house is open.
Mm-hmm.
They never mention that. He never, like, takes the time to be like, I knew the state of our home.
Mm-hmm.
It's left for us to be like, to put that together.
Yeah.
I
That is cool. Yeah.
It's a really surprisingly subtle for this big monster book.
Because when you realize that, you're like, oh shit, and it's so much.
It would be
more
easy to
fun
forget
Yeah.
the first read through.
Mm-hmm.
And then when going back, knowing, oh, their house is the same as the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, really, if you haven't put it together after the pharmacy, you're not gonna. And so 8:30 comes around, 8:30 p.m. They've had people on watch, and suddenly someone lets out a scream because something has landed on the window. Would either of you like to describe what's on the window? Or would you like me to read
Ooh.
the facts that are listed off about
Give
this
us
creature?
those dirty facts.
It is. It is 2 feet long.
Dirty.
Too big.
Segmented.
I hate when everything is segmented. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, you're right. You're right to be upset
So
by it.
upsetting.
It is very,
Imagine
very upsetting.
listeners take any object and just describe it as segmented. It'll upset you.
Hold on, we gotta
yeah,
follow
wait,
this.
no, yeah, let's-
segmented.
We gotta follow this little thought experiment through. Give us an example.
Cucumbers.
Why'd you pick the worst one? How did that work? I hate that. I'm
You
sorry.
gave Ben a
That
new nightmare.
genuinely upset me.
Your eyes shot wide open.
I hate being right.
Gross.
So this 2 foot long cucumber
Segmented.
is segmented with stalk eyes, wings, and pink skin like burnt flesh.
Everything in this mist is increasingly egregious, like more and more offensive and upsetting with every sentence. And then the things we find out later are like, well, fuck you.
Josh, did you mention, I'm sorry if I zoned out, the worst part of these things?
What's the worst part?
That it has something sticking off the back that is
did not.
either a stinger or genitals.
Yeah. That's a very
It's bad.
important confusion. So actually, I'll talk about this more when we cover the movie, but I also listened to the 3D audio version of The Mist. And what's very funny is because that's only dialogue, they use the commotion chatter to say some of the things that are in the descriptions of the book. So when the bugs land on the front of the window of the store, you can hear when everyone's like, oh my God, all this in the back, you can literally hear someone say, that thing hanging off the back, it's either a stinger or genitals.
That's great.
It's just very funny the way they chose to put in some of the descriptions masked as dialogue.
I'm super upset by what this thing is, and it gets worse. It's like that's the least problematic thing that they are going to see in the next several minutes.
I don't know. Anything with eyes on stalks fucks me up.
The thing that's coming has a beak, Ben.
Yeah.
Birds are horrible.
I can conceptualize a beak.
Yeah.
I can too. That's the problem.
Sam, would you like to describe what happens next? Since you're very
yes.
excited about it.
So they're seeing these nasty little segmented things, and they're super like appropriately grossed out, and probably, just starting to feel like that comfort with, okay, I have identified this thing. I know how bad this is. This is as bad as it gets. And then out of the mist, there comes a dark shape. And it turns out to be the creature that feeds on these bugs. Also, everything here is like a million times bigger than our version of like insects, for example, and birds. So this huge winged thing lands on the glass and just snatches this thing and then takes off. And we find out that all these little bugs are just like a moth to the light.
Mm-hmm.
And these birds are going to start swarming these very delicate glass windows.
That was the most stressful
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Because, these things are gross, but for me, the things coming are so much worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way it's described as these huge pterodactyl-like skin kites
Jeez.
are
I said
thudding
it
against this already damaged window.
I don't even know what you said because I can't stop thinking of skin kites.
What I love about it, though, is that up until now, we've seen the conversation with people in the know acknowledging, hey, the front of the store is all glass. Once everybody realizes that, shit's going to hit the fan. This moment happens, and you feel like collectively everyone else made that connection when they heard the creatures pounding, and it causes a stampede.
I'm so glad you used the word you feel them realize that, because I feel like you do.
Yeah.
Like when you're reading this book or listening to it, you can almost hear or feel like that moment of group understanding, tension, and then complete chaos.
Mm-hmm. Poor woman gets trampled.
Oh my gosh.
The way you started to say it, you just, woman gets trampled. And I don't know, it struck me. You can cut that.
This is super upsetting, though, because this woman gets trampled because people are understandably freaking out because they thought, this thing is nasty. Oh, but what's hunting it is even nastier. So, is it going to get worse than that even? And this is where David sees something, one of the top bags of dog food that is...
One of the bird things is pushing it through
that hole, and there's a guy standing under it, and he starts to yell at him to get out of the way, but this woman is screaming so loud about being trampled, which I guess you would do. But I've been that person so many times where I really need somebody to hear something, but someone else is louder than me, and I can't make myself heard, and I felt how frustrating that would be. And the bag falls and just lands right on this guy's head, and hopefully it killed him instantly.
Oh,
no, sure didn't. This guy's in for it.
yeah, you don't often wish instant death on people, but it would have been a kindness, I think.
That's the time.
It was cool though, because we didn't get to see, except for the bag boy, any of the other deaths. So now to get this brutal play-by-play.
Yeah. So once the bird makes its way in, David goes for the torch, gets ready to use it, and realizes he doesn't have a lighter.
Well, he used his last match to light a cigar earlier.
That's right. Thankfully,
good job, man.
Dan Miller, badass Dan Miller, shows up. And I like since we don't get his background, getting his Zippo had a Marine Corps logo on it, and then there's some other things, some other military phrases he uses later that let you infer his whole backstory. But he rules. He shows up with a Zippo, he lights the torch, and that's when they see this winged creature envelop the guy on the ground in its wings, and they just hear it tearing him apart.
What did you guys think?
Mortal ripping, I believe they describe it as.
What did you guys think of David's perception of this creature? Because he does this again later. He thinks about it's not an intelligent creature. It's stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these things are just animals. Just animals from somewhere else that we should not be looking at.
That we should.
Yeah, these things aren't hunting people. It's just there's more things to eat in here. It's also we didn't mention this, but the first time when he sees this creature tear into the guy on the ground, he refers to it. I don't remember what the phrasing is, but how it described as effortless. The way it just rips his flesh open like it's not even trying.
That's why birds suck. They can all do that. Watch out.
That's true. I've seen The Staircase.
Deep
It's a weird reference, but sure.
Yeah.
Those are for true crime. The owl theory.
Yeah,
The
no,
owl
I
theory.
know the owl theory.
Listeners.
Wow, you were very upset that I might think you don't know the owl theory. So
How
offended.
dare you?
Dare you assume I'm not up on my owl attack lore?
You know how I feel about owls.
If only it had been a giant bug creature instead of an owl, that lady who had been saved by this lady, the raid gunslinger, Mrs. Repler.
Yes.
Just coming out of nowhere, dual wielding cans of bug
She's
spray.
like, these look like fucking ugly giant bugs. I got bug spray. And
I
she's
love
right.
it.
She's right.
She has dual wielding cans and she suffocates this bug to death with spray. Then Amanda Dumfries scoops it in a bucket and just tosses it outside.
Which seemed like a little much. I would not go to the doors.
Yeah.
The building is covered in giant bugs. No.
Well, now things have settled down from this attack, and it is 1:30 a.m. and David has fallen into a semi-doze, which means it's time to go to Ben for the most popular segment on Derry Public Radio, King Dream Sequence with Ben Graham.
This one
Do you
left
not remember
no
this dream?
impression on me. I can tell you about my dream I had last night that was
Close.
1000% inspired by this book.
Yes.
Do it.
There's just monsters.
Nice.
I
Oh.
picked
Good
one
dream.
up by the tail and slammed it against a fence until it was dead.
Hell yeah.
Was it segmented?
Ugh.
That kind of just looked like a possum without skin.
Ugh.
Jeez.
I don't know.
This is the dream where he hears, or he thinks in his dream about the Arrowhead project, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when, there isn't really much to this dream besides that thought coming back into his head as he starts thinking about it. But when he wakes up here, before we get into what he is woken up for.
Oh, sorry. Also, can we mention real quick, Mrs. Carmody had commented, because I don't know if we pointed this out in the last episode, that things were going to get bad when it got dark.
Yes.
And so David, I hate this every time he thinks it. David thinks she was right.
Saying Mrs. Carmody's right about anything is the fucking worst. What I like about this scene is imagining what the store must be like in this 1:30 in the morning space where it's eerily quiet except for some muffled sobs here and there and murmuring amongst themselves and just the general like breathing cacophony in this spooky, unnatural place to be spending the night.
Nobody has like blankets and pillows. There's not, because he was trying to
they
find
just have
something
those
for
pads.
Billy.
Right.
Yeah. Think also how unnerving it would be to be in this place that is so familiar that you've seen a million times. It's a grocery store. There is order in a grocery store. But at this point, the place has to be disaster from all of these people who have been just piecemeal going through the store, devouring everything.
Right.
There has to be beer cans everywhere.
Yeah.
There's the charred corpse of a big crazy bird in the middle of the room.
How many?
Oh yeah, it caught on fire and flew into cans of pesto, and that's how it died.
Yeah, because
Dave.
Dave hit it with his broomstick, and it's described as like hitting an empty bag, which is very scary.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just thinking like maybe that's because the mist is heavier than normal air, and so maybe that's why it's so light. So it can
Maybe.
glide through the mist.
Interesting.
Oh, like
Weird.
morphologically, I didn't think of it that
Yeah.
deeply, but that's really cool.
That's very cool.
Creepy though.
And my next note here is kind of in that vein, Ben, where we get information about, for instance, all the sleeping pills are gone. They've been completely cleared off the shelves. The beer cooler had to be restocked. There's a group of winos that are all out of town people up front, except for one guy the guy's
just like that.
He didn't need an excuse to sniff the cork. I'd never heard that phrase before, but I love it. Mrs. Repler, our raid gunslinger, has decided this is all a dream, and David thinks about how much he'd absolutely love to rail Amanda Dumfries.
Yeah, we get a pretty long description about how she's just laying there asleep while he's staring at her with his massive erection.
That is such a funny little boner talk sting. Anyone, please. One day someone's gonna send us.
Someone
I
is,
hope
I
so.
swear.
It's this like long paragraph of talking about he thinks about her and then he thinks about his wife and how much he wants to go back and get his wife and but that doesn't change the wanting. And by the way, here's just a throwaway about how big my dick is. Like,
Well, I also like listening to Will Patton narrate it, who is amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
To hear him say, I love my wife and I just want to get back to her. But here I am just thinking about nailing this Amanda lady.
Yeah.
like he's surprised.
I just tacked on at the end of the paragraph, and my erection was enormous. It's like, why?
And I think it's described as like aggressively useless. Now, before we go any further down this road, I want to put this thought in your heads because I want to see where it goes. I don't think it's an accident that this section where he's talking about Amanda and the feelings with his wife and everything, it moves directly into him dealing with his inadequacy issues and his self-esteem issues. I just want to know if that, as we talk about it, I guess I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for here, but I just noticed it and I felt it couldn't be chance. It's not.
No, it's the perfect place to put it because he then starts thinking about his career as an artist and living in his father's shadow, essentially, because his dad was a really great artist. And David's strength is in doing like ad work.
Yeah, commercial work.
And that's not what, like, he has this kind of romantic notion of what an artist should do, and it isn't quite satisfied for a very long time with the fact that he can be a successful commercial artist. And so he's talking about how he had this show and he did a picture of the supermarket. And
Beans and a False Perspective is the title of the painting.
Terrible.
It sounded real dorky.
Yeah,
in the
it sure
description.
did.
And he was super proud of it. He had a show and this guy wanted it and he was the only one he wouldn't sell. And it said not for sale on it. And the guy ended up offering him like $4,000 for it. And he's like, and I could have used the money because we were adding on to the house and everything. And he, is it Ollie sees it and he's like, hey, could I, get a photo of that and run it in the ad, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, oh, this is just another nice piece of what I am good at. And finally, that's what allowed him to let go of feeling like he had to live up to some expectation that he only put on himself.
It's kind of it's an interesting story. It's well told, but the whole thing just, for me, just hit me over the head with just, this is Stephen King and his insecurities about his own work that he is putting into this, because it is King's classic. I mean, how many King writer characters are upset that their work is popular fiction? They want to be taken seriously. They want to be this great artist, but people only see their work as trashy fiction. Feel what you will about. I disagree.
Right.
But that's like well documented King's own personal feelings. And now this is so 1-to-1 of him giving up on this dream of being more than popular fiction, which that I say, come on, Stephen King, you're a multimillionaire. Your books are great. Just chill.
He's studied in universities. I think he's beyond that.
I think in a very weird way, I feel like this conversation, this memory is almost a very long road into giving him permission to bang Amanda Dumfries. Because, all right.
Where's the justification there?
Here we go. Watch me work.
All right.
The crux of this memory is how long it took him to accept that good enough is good. And when he is thinking about having sex with Amanda Dumfries, he's thinking about his wife and how guilty he feels about that and how much he does wish he could be with her. And all that pain doesn't make the wanting any less, but it's good enough.
Jesus Christ.
I'm saying and I know that's very callous right now, but because I really love the affair scene coming up, and we'll explain more about that, why that's a weird soundbite. But I think in a weird way, this sets the tone for that decision that he makes later down the line.
It's a complicated issue that we're about to dive into.
Absolutely.
But I guess we should talk about the other justification he soon has for banging Amanda.
Yeah, Ollie comes and gets him because he needs him to come to the back to check something.
Just the scene of Ollie showing up freaked me out
Yeah.
because there's been a lull and you've almost through this story of thinking about the past. At least I
Things
felt
seem normal for a
Yeah,
second.
yes.
Yeah,
you were
absolutely.
lulled into this false sense of security, and then Ollie shows up holding the gun. Right? I think
He has the gun. He's
in
not
my head
he's
he
not
was holding the
it,
gun.
but it's pointed out that he can see the butt of the gun sticking out of it.
Okay. Well, he shows up and is just like, Dave, you need to follow me, and won't elaborate. And it really got me. It has a very real sense of urgency.
Yeah.
What does he find?
He finds they go to the back room, and at first Ollie has a flashlight with a cloth over it, as so I assume so as not to wake everyone up. And he reveals it, and at first Dave doesn't recognize what he's looking at.
Thinks it's like dolls or mannequins.
Yeah,
Like everybody
decoration.
does. Yeah.
Right.
When they see a dead body.
Until he sees their faces, and it is the two army kids that were in the store mentioned very briefly. I had completely forgotten about them. And they have been hung.
Yes.
Yes. And they go over this, and David starts to scream, and Ollie stops him and says, we don't want people to know about this. That would be bad. But the thing that I got distracted by is immediately Ollie starts going over what might have happened.
Because their hands are tied behind their back.
Exactly.
Yes.
And he goes through this, I think they probably tied each other's hands behind their back and then struggled up onto the crate. Now, this is an insane theory, but my first thought is, why would that be your first guess? Is that they went through all of this trouble to you tie someone's hands behind their back to hang them. That's an execution. Right? If you're hanging yourself, why would you tie your hands behind your back?
Guilt.
In case you want to change your mind.
They're guilt too. You
Guilt
are
makes
executing
sense.
each other. It made me think
Yeah.
they're guilty. Like they know what happened, and everybody's speculation about the Arrowhead Project is likely true. And it made me concerned for Ollie, because how did he just so instantly like understand that and think about it? I probably wouldn't have occurred to me to question their hands. I wouldn't have even thought about it. I just would have been so upset by what I saw.
For sure, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, what's Ollie's history?
Is what
He served in Vietnam.
So Ollie saw this, but I wouldn't think, they tied their hands. My first thought when I read this was someone hung these guys. Someone, because immediately the reason they don't want everyone to know is because these two kids are from the army and most likely work for the Arrowhead Project.
And they think it'll cause panic if people...
And they think that I think Ollie says if no one had been asking them questions, but eventually they would have made the connection. Why? My first thought, if I saw these guys with their hands tied behind their back, is someone made the connection and someone did something about it.
That's very interesting.
Now, we're not really given anything that actually supports this. It's just, that was my first thought is, oh my God, someone executed these two guys because they thought they had something to do with this miss.
I only don't lean that way, just given how everybody in the store acts throughout the rest of this. I feel like they would have made a show of it.
Sure.
But I like that theory, though.
It doesn't really make sense with the chronology and who could, the only person that could have forced them to do all of the work of getting up on the boxes and tying their hands and what would be someone with a gun. And I feel like we have not been given any indication that Ollie would do that.
McVeigh could do it.
He's
a big butcher.
He's not crazy yet, though.
Nah, well, we don't know how crazy he was before. That is really interesting, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, see, maybe I don't know if you kind of mentioned something about with his backstory. This is a part where you do find out he was in Vietnam for a while. He saw people taking ears from soldiers. So it puts into perspective why Ollie has risen to the occasion, I guess.
He responded well because he has training.
Yeah, and the calm...
He's seen some shit.
Yeah.
Do you think that their theory holds water in the... Okay, going under the guise of they committed suicide because they have answers or are guilty. Do you think they heard people, like maybe overheard rumblings of maybe we should ask the army people before they took that step? Or do you think that they just went out?
I don't know. Part of me, like the super dramatic, hopeless part, thinks that they were just so overcome with guilt that they couldn't handle it and made that choice. Wait, could that have been like an agreement that they all had to make if something happened? That they, like, taking a cyanide pill?
Oh,
that's interesting.
That's very interesting. Because nobody's been back there since before the bird attack.
I don't know, because that is funny. It's really interesting. That's a great thought because, like, if this is this ultra hyper secret science experiment project, it would make sense. Like, hey, if something happens,
if you get caught,
you cannot let this information get out into the general public because it's military secrets, you know. But also, that doesn't make any sense. In that it seems that just everyone knows about the Arrowhead Project.
They know that something is up there. We established earlier, nobody has any idea what really it is.
I just find it funny that if we are to believe that the mist was caused by the Arrowhead Project, if I would think that if the army was fucking around with interdimensional bullshit, that the townsfolk wouldn't even know the installation was there. Right?
In real life, yeah, for sure.
I don't know, though. Maybe that's like arrogance.
It would be like if
they don't know it's there. It's a front. Like everybody has an idea. It's supposed to be this, agriculture stuff, etc. So it's a poorly kept secret. But
one point, we live very close to a military installation.
I was just about to say, it would be like if that military installation that I used to work at doing data entry, if we found out, they punched through to hell.
They could
but
have.
They could, because there are so many places you
look so disappointed.
We never have. We've all been on the island. We don't have access to all the places there could be things.
There's an island
possible.
In our community.
There's an island.
We live in the Midwest.
We live.
Why did you say that so menacingly?
I just
realized that was a threat.
I just realized how spooky that sounds if you don't know where we live.
Just for a split second, we turned into Welcome to Night Vale. That was awesome. That ruled.
That's amazing.
Please just throughout the rest of the episode, occasionally whisper menacing things. I fucking love that.
It only took us 4 years to find out the job we needed CM to do every episode. Slightly menace the audience. On his way back, Amanda Dumfries calls him over and says she was upstairs in the manager's office looking for some blankets and pillows.
Oh, yeah.
Found out that door got a lock on it. So it's a done deal. They go up to the manager's office. And before I give my take, which I've already mentioned, I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on the scene in the manager's office.
I think he mentions his enormous segmented erection again here.
Yeah.
Okay, first I have to mention, shout out, oh no, and I forgot who told us this. One of our listeners messaged us when we first started covering this and pointed out, hey, have you guys ever noticed that in the opening chapters of this book, some guy rushes in and he's all bloody and he's freaking out and they take him up to the manager's office because there's only one small window or there's no windows or something. And he's never mentioned again. And then Amanda and David plow in that office. Where'd that guy go?
I think that's Dan Miller.
Was it?
No, he wasn't identified.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He is in the movie. Maybe that's why that's in my head. That is the idea that guy might have just been still in the office. Because they do say it's pitch black and they couldn't see a thing.
Laurie Holden and Tom Jane, I'd hide in that office.
All right, what do you think about that? So they have sex. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and Josh, you and I have talked about this before as guests on other podcasts because a lot of people are divided on this. Some are very upset with these two because they're both married and they both, by all accounts, love their spouses. And even the act itself, like they do want each other, but he's thinking about his wife and their wedding night and everything, and they're in the dark and he can't see Amanda, and he says that she calls out a name that wasn't his, so that made him about even. And overall, what you're supposed to, I think, or how King has written this, is that they are in an extreme situation under a lot of stress, pretty sure like who they're with, like this is it, and they take comfort in each other. And people either understand that and accept it or are really mad at them for it. I get it. I think I get it. It would be horrible. And I think people do strange things when they're stressed out. And it's Tom Jane. So you have to.
I think just for the sake of the story, we got more of stuff like this. Not the sex scene necessarily. It's a Stephen King sex scene. It's whatever.
Right, yeah.
But more of, and we'll get to this in actually the next scene, of what I wanted more of our protagonist, Dave, to be more of a shitheel.
Yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah. Because he's just a dude.
He's
kind of portrayed as not an everyman exactly, but just he's a guy
he's a little passive.
with a family. He's very passive.
He's responding as people need him, but he's not like, I'm going to take charge.
He's not the leader.
He's looking to others to take charge.
He is very much just one of these people. He is not positioned as the hero of the story.
Right.
And that's why in the next scene between him and Dan Miller, I wish there was more of I wish the point of the story, or the main like thrust of the story, was differences between him and who I see as the actual hero of the story, Dan Miller.
Yeah.
Because we get a little bit of like Dave is instantly like, Dave has a dude crush on this guy. Like he is like, this guy kicks ass.
Yeah.
And I wish the difference between Dave's kind of just surviving, doing what little he can, juxtaposed with Dan Miller taking charge, making the plans. I wish that was more of the thrust of the story, and it would make what happens to Dan sting more, you know?
It's funny because now that we're talking about it, I realize that even him having sex with Amanda Dumfries is almost passive, because she's the one who is like, to all points, this is the one line of dialogue in that description that I feel like you can either take it as the comforting angle or the shitheel angle, and it's the line where he says, "In darkness, she was nothing but a shape." And you can read that in two very different tones and make either of those points about whether he's a good person or not. To me, that's the line that synced up with the good enough is good.
Yeah.
And
and it kind of excuses him in a way, like, well, it's not about her.
Right. It's just this is the best option available in this crazy situation. Yeah. All right, let's get down to Dan Miller, because they've come down and it's dawn now, and Dan shares his donuts and cigarettes. Actually makes David laugh for a second, which I thought was
a great
nice
way to instantly make a character stand out as like, oh, this guy is awesome, because he's retained a sense of humor in this situation. Right. Instantly, it was like,
this guy rules.
Why once again, why have we not been following this guy?
And then Dan proceeds to break down his assessment of everything, saying, we can't stay here. I've broken down, here are all the groups of people that are definitely not going anywhere now, but I think there's enough of us we can make a go of this. And he wants David to come along, mostly because he wants David's 4-wheel drive. And they come up with this plan to do a test expedition to the pharmacy next door before they try to make it to the cars and actually get away. And they'll see how hard that is, how difficult it is. And they can do it under the guise of getting pain medication for the woman who was trampled and had her leg broken.
Yeah.
They also are doing it to explore this theory that they have that is never answered.
Yeah, it's Dan Miller's theory, right?
Yeah, because he says, we when the flat earthers, we let the rope out, they didn't get out of the parking lot, and something big got them. Why didn't we hear cars being damaged? Because
such a good question.
The parking lot was packed when all of this went down. He says, I have a feeling maybe they fell through the earth, that maybe there's just 30 feet out or something, a cliff or something. And then we never get anything further into that other than the ground was damaged.
Yeah, very messed up. The last and probably most frightening point is Mrs. Carmody has followers now. At this point, there are 2 women who are just attached at her hip, listening to everything she says. And he basically tells David she's gonna look more and more appealing the longer this goes. So let's when she starts talking about blood sacrifices, I don't want to be around for that. So let's do it.
Everybody has pretty good instincts.
Yeah.
I think this is the most upsetting scene.
The trip to the pharmacy.
Yeah, because you've been assaulted by 5-foot wide tentacles that go beyond your line of sight, and these insect bug creatures with maybe penises and horrible bird things. And you're like, well, that's all really fucked up.
And I haven't gone outside yet.
It's worse. What is coming is worse than that.
What'd you guys think about the conversation he has to have with Billy about going to the pharmacy? Because that's tough.
I felt like Billy just sort of slept through it in a way. Like, he's upset, but he just he's passive too.
Well, saying, he doesn't want his dad to go because he doesn't want to be alone for sure. But when he says he wants to get back to his mom, and David's like, well, this is the first step on that road. And Hattie kind of snips at him.
And he snips at her.
He snips. Yeah, he snips back.
Oh, yeah, because it's a super fucked up
It
thing.
really is.
Because she says, don't build the boy's hope up. And he goes, what the hell? Which I think is a very funny response.
It really is.
Why would you say that? What the fuck?
And then she's given up already. It's very, very clear.
Yeah, because she came to him earlier saying, I just know my husband's dead. Your wife is probably dead too, right?
Right. So we get our team together after David manages to pull himself away from Billy. And
Amanda's upset about it too.
yeah, Amanda, I felt like it was a conversation that didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
Because she's essentially says, if shit goes bad, turn coat and run. Don't do it for me, do it for Billy. And I really wanted David to be like, yeah, of course I wouldn't do it for you. Like, I barely know you. But our raid gunslinger is coming along on this expedition, and that made me very happy. Mrs. Repler rules.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, armed with a bag full of raid and a tennis racket.
Fuck yeah. Why not? So Dan Miller gets to the front of the store and he shouts to everybody and tells everybody that they are going to be making this excursion. And Mrs. Carmody, of course, can't let that fly. She has to preach holy hellfire about them bringing the devil upon their heads and all of these cryptic things.
And it's just upsetting because it's her trying to control them and what's going on in the supermarket.
But then she
scaring everybody else. I hate it.
But then she gets hit in the boob with a can of peas. Fucking great.
By Amanda, right?
By Amanda, yeah. I thought it was interesting that they talk about how Mrs. Carmody is winding up everybody who's listening. And the second she gets hit with the can of peas, people start dispersing. She's still going strong. She's still trying to get it. But I like that it's described as the spell being broken, essentially. Like, I don't know. She can't be a prophet if she can be hurt by peas. So what did you guys think about the expedition? We've got our group outside. We've made it to the pharmacy. What jumped out at you the hardest in this pharmacy scene?
Spiders the size of dogs.
Seriously.
That's too big.
With acid
That's too
webbing. With acid webbing. It's not enough that they're huge and their webbing would probably capture a human, but it's going to eat your flesh as it does that.
Two things. It's such a minor. Spiders the size of dogs should be enough. But when he points out that they had too many legs.
Like 14 legs or
Yeah.
something?
That's like a pee.
God
That's
damn.
like something that ends in the pee,
Yeah.
which I can't deal with.
It's too many.
Yeah.
It bothered me enough, the throwaway line from the gunslinger when they see the mutant spiders in
Yeah.
the basement of the way station. Bad enough. When they are, this big. No, thank you. But also the thing that it might be after they're running away when he really gets the first good look at one.
Yeah.
And says, it's not a spider. It's not. It's something else. It's just the easiest way for his brain to comprehend it is by going spider. Don't think about it. Don't think about it more than that.
You will go insane.
It also hurt me for some reason when they first get in there and he finds a comic book on the ground and he picks it up and puts it in his back pocket for Billy because it's like, ugh, why bother, man? Everything is ruined.
At least he got something that he came for.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he had to fold them in half. They're not going to be worth anything.
The scene when kind of the trap is sprung,
Yeah.
because they know the door to the pharmacy was propped open when the mist rolled in because the heat was out, and so the door was open, so they knew there was a chance people could be in there, but there was a chance other stuff had gotten in there. And they see the webs, thinking what the first guy says they're streamers. And they find not only at the entrance a decapitated body that the head is just gone, but when they start to leave, who is it? Buddy gets webbing wrapped around his leg, and it just the leg of his jeans slides off because it ate through the denim so fast. And that's when David puts together, well, we know what happened to that guy's head now.
Yeah.
It's
monsters give that guy Final Fantasy pants.
that is 100% true.
Is this where David is putting together too that because they can't really hear or see in the mist, they probably can smell them and that's how they're being found. And that's why they're protected in the store because it's closed up.
The note that I made right after that was, remember when the very first thing that happened when they came out and they got to the pharmacy was the one guy puked outside? That's a pretty strong smell to follow back. And I wonder if that added to what, because there were things inside, but I wonder if that smell is what brought what they face outside.
They all probably smell pretty bad too. 'Cause
Probably,
they've
yeah.
been stressed out, adrenaline.
Yeah, they've already mentioned that like some of the milk has started going over.
Yeah.
So like the smell's gonna get out.
Oh, yeah. So shit hits the fan. Everybody tries to make their way back, and not everybody makes it. Mike Hatlin gets his jugular torn open, and he's dragged off by one of the spiders into the mist. Poor Dan Miller gets completely engulfed in a spider and is being wrapped up in webbing as he dies.
This is what I meant earlier. I wish that there had been more time spent building Dan up as like this paragon, the guy holding the whole place together. Because when this happened, all of this happened so fast, it didn't click to me that Dan died,
That it was Dan.
it was
I
Dan,
understand.
because all of them, only 3 of the 7 make it back to the market, and it wasn't until they burst through the doors and it was like, it's only me and Mrs. What's-her-face? Repler. That I realized, oh shit. Oh yeah, Dan totally fucking died.
Do you think we didn't get that because we kind of have that with Ollie?
Except Ollie, well,
I mean, because Ollie's sort of the other person we're really attached to.
yeah.
Maybe it would have been like too much of that repeating.
Maybe.
It could have easily pushed David to being third string instead of second.
Well, it might have made Ollie's death later less impactful.
Oh,
is what I
yeah,
mean.
that's true. Oh, no, I 100% see what you're saying. Yeah. So they get back inside. Plan was a massive failure, obviously.
Well, we got the comic book.
We did get the comic book. So David passes out until the afternoon, and Ambrose Cornell, which kick-ass name, he was the guy with the shotgun in his truck.
Yep.
Him and Amanda are the ones who wake him up because Mrs. Carmody now has almost a dozen followers. And of the people remaining in the store who are not catatonic or committed suicide, that group is now nearly the majority of people still alive in this store. And that is something they cannot accept.
It happened so quick, too.
Yeah.
And they're going out and coming back. Only a couple of them probably sped that process up. And again, I didn't realize this until we were talking about it for this episode. He's passive.
Yeah.
Like, they're the
Yeah.
ones who come to him with the plan.
This bothered me a little bit, just with the general feeling of fucking nihilism about the human spirit. Like, bummed me out in a major way. Like, I get it. It's America in 2022. We've seen that some people can be convinced of some real whack shit, but I would like to think I would love to aspire to be optimistic enough to believe that people would not resort to human sacrifice
In like a
within
day.
24 hours.
But there are two things to keep in mind. One was what I brought up at the very, very beginning with that they mentioned that Mrs. Carmody has a way of talking people through their better senses. And two, it is mentioned that she has not stopped. She's basically been preaching for 24 hours straight. And while everyone else seems to be losing steam, he points out that she keeps getting stronger. It's like her reserves do not run out. So I bet that really speeds up the brainwashing.
This isn't a situation you could conceive of either. It's not
True.
a natural
True, yeah,
disaster. It is like otherworldly. So I think that gives her more power too, because she's acting like she knows what's up because this is the end of the world, like hell on earth, essentially. Everyone else is just lost and confused. So they're finding their leader.
Yeah.
Can I ask y'all something? It's completely unimportant, but it's something that kept jumping out at me and I couldn't figure why. Seemingly every time that Dave thinks about Mrs. Carmody, he thinks about a display in her antique store of animals drinking out of a river that is made out of a mirror. Is that a metaphor for something? Because I was trying to fucking figure it out.
They're all trapped animals.
I-
They're stuffed and hang no, but I mean, they're, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
just
kind of took it as that.
the visual of like these like stuffed animals, the mirror river is such an interesting visual that I was like, this has to mean something. And he keeps bringing it up. It has to mean something.
It's upsetting to me because they can never satisfy that thirst because it's a mirror.
Yeah, something that like, yeah.
What if it's her comfort with death, that is the idea of dead things forced to look at their own reflection forever is certainly dark enough for Mrs. Carmody.
Yeah.
I
There's
feel like
something there.
I feel like it does help. You almost wonder if the taxidermy things she has may have been sacrifices she made in her free time. I'm not like
That's a bit of a
I don't think
stretch,
so,
but-
because they talk about like people think of her as a
That's
witch.
true. A witch doctor, like she
and
has potions.
She has
and
crazy.
stuff.
I think it's fully reasonable that there is a
All right, you
a
made that
rabbit
happen.
trap behind Mrs.
Yeah.
Carmody's house or some shit like that. So after expressing these concerns, David essentially gives Dan's plan to everybody and says that they're getting out of there. They can't wait, but they are going to wait until like 4 a.m. so they can sneak out while people aren't paying attention. And the saddest thing as they're getting these people, I think it's Hattie Turman that basically says, I'll go just for the chance to see the sun again.
Yeah.
And then it's such a brutally simple line.
I didn't even think about that reading this. Is like, oh my God, yeah, this thing has lasted long enough that you might wonder if you will ever see the sun again. And the idea of that is hard to swallow, that you might not.
I wrote a very strange line in my notes, and it just said, Mrs. Carmody is the essential oils made manifest.
Sure.
That was a very weird note. Why did I write it that way? This is the talk of expiation, of atonement. And it is the referring to Mrs. Carmody as the essential oils of people is the selling that promise. I am the only one that has this cure, and the cure is so simple. And because expiation alone just means atonement. And it is her who has decided what that atonement has to be on behalf of everyone else.
Yeah, I would have attached that to religion and not essential oils, but yeah, same difference.
Same difference.
What did essential oils do to you?
It's something people easily buy into that it'll solve all their problems. And that's Mrs. Carmody. She is the easy solution.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like religion at all. Never mind.
So they are now calling for blood. She does this whole speech about expiation and that there's only one thing that God has said will cleanse anything, and it's McVeigh, the butcher.
The worst, the scariest person to say blood.
Yep.
Well, he doesn't say it like that. Blood. That would be scary. But David notices he's the one who said it, and then he thinks back like, yeah, that guy knows how to butcher things. Watched him butcher a lot of things. That he's got a sharp knife and a dead look in his eyes.
Yeah. This is so maddening to me. And I know that it's because I am looking for reason where there is none, because like any zealots, there is no reasoning with them. But like this entire time, I just want to, like, if I were there, I just want to scream, what's your end game here? What do you think that, because she's screaming, you can't go out there because you will die, but you have to stay in here so we can ritualistically murder you. To what end? You insane
Rapture?
person. Yeah,
I guess.
it's the only... the answer obviously is it doesn't matter.
Right,
It's for
of course.
God. That frame of mind is so massively triggering for me. I hate that, which is why she's such an effective, scary villain here at the end.
So let's jump to this conflict. Ollie leads the group to Ollie's the person who is saying, here's the plan to get in the car. You guys grab groceries. And as they get to the door, about 15 people with Mrs. Carmody at the head stand blocking their way. And she lays into them. She destroys their groceries. She calls out the adultery. And in the end, says that the blood of sacrifice must come from one of their number because they are the non-believers. They are the reason this is happening because they refuse to bend to God's will.
Which very quickly, like instantaneously escalates to 2 and then all of them because she starts chanting, get the boy, get the whore, get them all.
Calling for the boy.
That's
It
the
is
worst.
so wildly anti-religion, like this book. So much of Mrs. Carmody's thing is that the othering of the unbelievers is a little on the nose.
It also says a lot that when she calls for the human sacrifice to be this like 5-year-old boy, that nobody in the group.
No, because they start moving forward.
Everybody moves forward on it. Like that's
like,
not
right.
that is not a moment of turn means that there is no hope, in my opinion, for this group
It's
of
very,
people.
very bleak.
And as it starts getting intense, a gunshot rings out, and Ollie has shot Mrs. Carmody through the stomach. Not enough suffering. It's the same feeling I felt about Margaret White. Not enough.
Oh, she is such a Margaret White.
Yeah, those two would hang out.
Ugh.
We're going to have to add Mrs. Carmody to our Derry fight night.
But of course, she, like all terrible villains you hate, she gets the last word by saying they'll all die out there and then collapses. And someone has the audacity to yell, "You murdered her!" Yeah! And David's like, what was she going to do with my kid?
Did it upset you guys that when Dan Miller was initially laying this plan out for David and David was pushing back, he's like, look at what happened to Norton and his gang. And he was like, well, we don't have to go out like lambs to the slaughter. It's that like biblical imagery that
yeah.
reflects what Miss Carmody is doing.
That's why I didn't even think about that. So they make their way out. Ollie gets the doors open to the car and is immediately sliced in half
No,
by
this
something
sucked
red
so
with claws.
bad. It was segmented too. It was, right?
It made Ollie
Yeah.
segmented.
Oh, Josh,
Too soon.
Sorry.
Too soon. Come
Get
on.
out.
All right, it's been fun.
No, it's this all happens so quickly because the gunshot already is like such
Ramped up.
yeah, it's such it happens. There's no build up. It is just suddenly they are under attack and Ollie takes care of it, which a little not what I was expecting with our Chekhov's gun. I expected it to be much worse for our heroes.
That's
Well-
why, though.
Yeah,
He spends the specific amount of bullets before getting in the car.
that's true. But yeah, it's so fast. He just shoots and then they are out the door and Ollie doesn't have time to make what he did make sense, I guess, or to make it.
He clearly
He feels
feels very
bad,
guilty
yeah.
about it.
He said, I wouldn't have done it if there was another way.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like telling David, like, I didn't want to kill her, but I had to.
Yeah, and before he has a chance to
Yeah.
process, for us to process with him, he is unceremoniously cut in
Brutally
half.
killed.
Yeah. Hattie Turman is taken by one of the spider creatures. Cornell Ambrose retreats back into the market. Mrs. Repler slaps Amanda back to sanity.
'Cause she's screaming.
She's screaming.
She's hysterical.
Yeah. And they all get in the car. And David throws Billy in the car and jumps in. And they get in the car and they just, for the longest 5 minutes of any of their fucking lives, while they wait to find out whether this scent theory is good or not.
Mm-hmm.
And once they establish it's safe, David opens the door and runs for the gun, while Amanda also freaks out again. Understandably. I mean, those things couldn't be too far away. And now they've got the gun. There's 4 of them in the Scout, and there are 3 bullets. And David says, if something happens, I'd just have to find a way myself.
Boy, sure, I'm glad he doesn't have to use that gun, right, guys? I'm glad that never happens and never will.
And this is what we get from Ben. We talked about it earlier, the upheaval of the road in some of these areas, that he can only go 5 miles an hour because the road is full of cracks and upheavals, all sorts of stuff.
Takes him 40 minutes to drive a 7-minute drive.
I have a weird theory, but it only kind of makes sense. In that, in this merging worlds scenario, what if the Arrowhead Project merged us with this entire other planet that has this atmosphere, these creatures, all this stuff, but that world is physically bigger than our world? And it was the earthquake is literally the planet cracking open to make room for space it didn't have before.
Yeah, because the scale of everything, I think, CM, you mentioned everything is just bigger.
Yeah.
It gets
And as
bigger
we're
and bigger.
about to find out, to an insane degree.
Yeah. And so that's what that's the idea. That's the headcanon in my brain. They make it to the house, but there's too many down trees to get back to
Yeah,
David's
they can't
house.
make it like all the way down the
They can
very
make
long
it to
drive.
the driveway.
And he has to, this part killed me because he basically has to give up. And he's telling himself she had enough food for 10 days. Again, doesn't mention the picture window. And he makes a comment that, like, he's sitting there trying to figure out what he's going to do. And anybody could have pointed out, like, hey, man, not going to happen, because they can hear creatures in the woods around them. And he's like, they were kind enough to just let me sort through it on my own.
Thankfully, Billy's asleep during this. And then that's when, Ben, you mentioned it earlier, he wakes up and says, did we get mommy? And he says, we couldn't. And he says, okay, and goes back to sleep. Doesn't cry. He's just given up. They find a slew of brand new horrors as they make this drive. Any favorites?
Oh, the obvious one. The obvious one that is this really cool parallel to the dream sequence at the beginning of the book. They're driving down the highway, taking it slow, because this got to me. What he says, the unimaginable stress of driving and knowing anything can come out of the mist. anything at any time. They could just come up and see a drop off. There could just be the end in front of them. Any unimaginable monster could creep out that just seeing it, which is what happens. As they're driving, Amanda suddenly, I believe it was Amanda, suddenly screams, "What is that? What is that?" And it is the legs of some impossibly huge creature. He says it is something, all I can say is it was big.
It's like so big it has its own ecosystem. There are other creatures presumably like feeding off of.
Yeah, something he says something that dwarfed the largest whale. The dinosaurs. Because Billy asks, "Is it a dinosaur?" And he says, "No,
that's bigger than a dinosaur.
There's nothing that could ever be that big."
That's so
legs.
upsetting.
Miss Repler cranes her neck and says it passes over them, and she says she cannot see the underside of its body, like the god that was trampling across the lake, which is a really interesting, I haven't worked it all out, of that they basically kill religion. They kill the idea of religion. They reject religion. But here in the mist, they find this new terrifying god coming at them.
So it's not an anti-religion book.
It's anti. I don't know. Like I said,
it's very pro-mist god.
It's a very half-formed thought. But the fact that it steps right next to David's door, and he says when it leaves, he looks and it left a hole in the highway that he cannot see the bottom of.
Oh,
that's horrifying.
And he has to drive on that.
Yeah, that's the scariest shit I've ever heard. It drove me insane.
Shit, the earthquakes could be just from the weight of that one creature walking around.
Yeah, and this other thing, and it's really tenuous connection, but did its description remind you of anything?
It reminded me of Cloverfield.
I do love that. Its skin is gray with mottled black spots.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
It's a long boy.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, it's
cool.
From Lisi's story, if anybody hasn't listened to those episodes or read that book.
Yeah, because without that context, saying it's the long boy is an insane thing to say.
I liked when they thought they were going by downed trees and David realized it was more tentacles. I'm like, God, there's more tentacle creatures out here. As David wraps up all of this, we find out that the group is at a Howard Johnson's, and he is writing that there is no happy ending to this story. It's an Alfred Hitchcock ending, meaning that it's ambiguous, and whoever finds these pages will be able to create their own ending, basically, because he's leaving the story here. Which
is fun because when the woman at the beginning who went home to get her kids left, he comments that she just disappeared. They were never going to know what happened to her. And then when they drove away from the supermarket, he mentions, and I never knew what became of everyone left in the supermarket. And now we as a reader will never know what became of them.
Yeah.
I didn't even follow that. That's amazing.
This moment also kind of seemed like King's insecurities creeping through into the text, because it is him saying, yeah, so it's an ambiguous ending and a lot of people hate that, but that's just how you're gonna have to like it.
I feel like he has to warn you, this is what you're gonna get. It's the same way that we got that with Colorado Kid. Like at the very beginning, it's like, look, the answer's not going to be great at the end of this.
He's just tired of people bitching at him. I get it. I like, this is the way you're going to have to like this.
We find out that David now has a secret. He was rummaging through the manager's apartment, searching through the AM/FM, and he heard something. Or at least he's pretty sure he heard something. He's the only, I don't know if he's a reliable narrator at this point, but he heard one single word.
This is 4 days later, right?
Yeah. Well, it has been 4 days since the storm.
Yes.
And he says that he's leaving these pages on the counter of the restaurant in the Howard Johnson's, and in the morning he's going to take off because they have a destination. And so he's going to leave the pages, and then he's going to kiss Billy goodnight, and he's going to tell him 2 words: Hartford and hope. That's where we leave this book. So, thoughts on the ending before we get into ratings?
I love the ending, and I often write part of it on hotel stationery and leave it for the maids when I stay somewhere.
What part?
Just the end, like the message
Yeah.
to the person who reads it.
That's amazing. Ben?
Yeah, they probably end up fine.
Right. I like that it is an ending that has a touch of hope, but I always felt it was a bit of unreliable hope. I don't think he actually heard a word.
I like that though
Yeah.
too. Like we will never know, and those are my favorite endings where I get to decide and I get to speculate and go back and forth and just think about it.
Ready to rate this?
I think I just
Yeah.
did.
Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I love The Mist. I've always said that, so my rating is not going to be a surprise. Well, it wouldn't be a surprise anyway. But this, like all King short stories, is so good, and I had no problems with it at all. There was nothing in it that bothered me or stuck out to me as weird, and it was fun. And I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 blue chambray shirts.
I really like this story. I will say, I would say famously love King's short stories. I love any short stories. I think they are the perfect way to consume fiction. It's great. This, I wish King would have picked one direction or another, because this is a novella. I feel like it could have been condensed a little bit or fleshed
Full
out
book.
into
Yes.
a full novel.
Yes.
I do think it's kind of in this middle ground where there is a little bit of fucking around that I get. It really does hammer home the like despair of it, but I don't know. I think it could have been better as
Way longer.
a true short story, or yes, a full novel where some of these minor characters get more fleshed out.
Yeah.
And maybe the ramping up of Mrs. Carmody is a little more drawn out and doesn't seem so sudden.
Sure. Like a week-long stay as opposed to
Yeah.
a 2-day stay before they
Yeah.
dip out.
That said, it's a fun story. The monsters are cool. 4 out of 5 blue chambray shirts.
Terrific. I really love the story. It's such a fun, contained, easily digestible adventure.
Yeah.
I've listened to the audiobook, I've read it, I've listened to the 3D audio, I watched the movie with my wife, and we are going to be watching another movie of it together. So it's safe to say I love the Mist, and so I'm just going to give it 5 out of 5 blue chambray shirts.
And that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us next time where we will be covering the movie The Mist. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham, I'm CM Alexander reminding you, terror is the widening of perspective in perception. Hello everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to The Mist, Part 2. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Derry Public Radio and Twitter at Derry Public. You can also send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. And if you're looking for more content in between release dates, please check out our Patreon page for bonus episodes. And if you'd like some merchandise, follow us on Etsy. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.